Okay.
It's always going to be crooked. And then if I say, hey, look at my righteousness, and you start building your life on my righteousness, your life's going to be crooked too. Because the level is going to be off, right? We need God's righteousness. We need His level. His level is right. And so when we are justified, we're made from being crooked to being made straight, based on God's righteousness.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
So it's the making right part that I think you probably want to lean into. But that picture of a level
Okay.
helps people understand, oh yeah, I'm crooked,
Okay.
you know? Atonement. A little longer, all right? But it's a good illustration. It seems to work really well with people. If I take your hat and I burn it, what should happen to me? And you can use this, right? Like you can use it as an illustration in this class. If I take your hat and burn it, what should happen to me? Like, what's justice?
You should be penalized.
Well, what would be right? Like, if a judge says, what should happen to me? What should happen to me?
Should put it out.
I'm going to jail just for burning your hat. That seems like
Should give me a new hat.
Get you a new hat, exactly.
Sure.
So repay you, right?
Yes.
Who's the person you love the most in this life, besides Jesus?
Oh man, my mom.
Your mom,
And
okay.
my grandma.
Okay, I'm into your mom, 'cause I'm not touching grandma. All right? If I kill your mother, can I pay you anything? No. So what should happen to me now? It's justice then.
Your life.
Yeah, and either capital punishment or life in prison. We won't talk about the politics of that, right? So my life, right? So I've stolen God's glory, but I can't pay His glory back, right? I don't have enough glory. Any glory I have is His glory.
Yeah.
And so I'm stuck with not being able to pay His glory, and because His glory is eternal, I have an eternal punishment that's on me. Make sense so far? Okay? So what Jesus does, because He is fully God, He has infinite glory. So He can pay the Father back the glory that the Father is owed by me without losing any glory Himself.
Okay.
So good? All right?
Yeah.
And because He's fully God, because He's fully man, He can take all that eternal punishment in one moment on the cross. That's exactly what He does. He pays, and He pays so that we are restored. While He pays the payment, and He takes the punishment for us. So far, so good, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, good. We're not to atonement yet.
Yeah.
So, I won't confuse you with those terms. So,
Yeah.
there are terms for those, all right? So, let's say that after I have killed your mother, I get out of jail, I've done my time, okay? And I know there's not enough time that I can possibly do. Let's say under the law, I do my time,
Yeah.
okay? And I get out. Are you inviting me to Thanksgiving dinner? No. Of course not, right? But what God does is because the payment has been made and the punishment has been taken, He says, I want to adopt you as my child. That's atonement. We become at one with one another.
Okay.
Does that make sense? So it's like this grand relationship restoration that happens with atonement. It's more than just, I declare you not guilty. It's, I want to make you my child, even though you've done this terrible, awful sin against me.
Yeah, I was gonna talk about adoption too, but
Yes.
but Dr. Howard was like, you gotta stick to 2 points only. Cut things out.
The story works though.
Story works, though,
And
okay.
the story, you don't have to talk too much about adoption, but you can get into the story at that point.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's for atonement. We're going to go to transaction next. So you say it's kind of like a transaction. If I pay Amazon, Amazon gets back. The problem with that is it presumes that I can give something to God that He needs, and I can get something from Him. And that's the downside of that particular. All illustrations are bad, but that's the difficulty with that particular transaction. I'm going to suggest to you that when we place our faith in Jesus, it's less of a transaction, and it's more like if you jumped in the pond. What happens if you jump in the pond?
You're gonna sink.
Before you sink, what's the very first thing that's going to happen to you?
You're gonna fall into the water.
Good, and then what happens?
You get wet.
You get wet,
You wet.
right? Why do you get wet?
The water.
Because it's water. That's the relationship between water and you. When you have faith, you are placed into Jesus. And because of the relationship of Jesus, he then takes all the sin as though it was his own, and you get all of his righteousness. Make sense? Okay, so it's less of a transaction, more of a relationship. I can't not be righteous in Jesus. Just like I can't not be wet in the pond. I have to be wet. That's the relationship that occurs there. And so we gain Christ's righteousness, not because of a transaction, not because of something I've given to God, but because I jumped in the pond. That's the only thing that can happen.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, one last thing. I really love how you connected to Chatterbox with the law. That's a really strong point there. So that you want to keep that. That's really, really good. All right.
Mm-hmm.
The difference between so holiness is what we need.
Mhm.
Okay. So there's a holiness that's according to the law, and then there's a holiness that's according to the Spirit. Okay. Now, the holiness that's according to the law is still good, but it's insufficient. Okay. It's insufficient for two reasons. First of all, the law can't stop us from doing the wrong thing. I know the speed limit is 65.
Mhm.
It doesn't stop me from going 70. All it does is tells me that's wrong. It doesn't empower me to actually follow the law.
Mhm.
That makes sense? Nor can it distinguish between right and wrong. All it can do is say, don't go 65. Now, if over 65. Now, if I'm speeding someplace to stop me from killing your mother, right? So if I'm speeding someplace to save somebody's life, even if the police were to find that I were wrong in that, they probably wouldn't charge me. Because they recognize that the law there is not really distinguishing well. It requires a judge to do that. The law can't. The law will say, you were speeding.
Mhm.
But the judge will look at it and say, but you are helping people, and so we're gonna put the law to the side at this point. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it can't stop me, and it can't distinguish between right and wrong. All it knows is what it is. That's the problem with the Old Testament law. In the New Testament, because we have jumped into Jesus, because we have faith in Jesus, he gives us his Holy Spirit. And his Holy Spirit can both empower us to say, you know what, the right thing to do is to drive the speed limit. And can also say, at this point, you need to go faster because it's necessary for this moment.
Okay.
Does that make sense? The Holy Spirit guides us and empowers us.
Okay.
Because you're dealing with justification, atonement, sacrifices, holiness, faith,
Yeah.
you need to come up with stories to help with
Okay.
that. I think especially because they're high school students,
Mhm.
there is just no vocabulary that they have. So you need to come up with stories like that, all right? That's going to mean probably readjusting some of the other material in there because you're going to need to spend more time making it. But if they don't understand justification, the whole thing falls apart at that
Yeah,
point. So
that's-
the stories are important. If they don't understand atonement, it's going to fall apart. So having those stories, okay? If you like those, let me know and I can give you more detail on them.
Okay.
All right. But I would look at do like a Google search on sermon illustrations for justification, sermon illustrations for atonement, sermon illustrations for holiness, and there may be better stories out there than what I'm giving
Okay.
you. Okay.
Quick question too.
Yeah.
Did you want me to just cut out the condemnation part?
Yeah, I don't think you really need to
Okay.
do that. Yeah.
Okay, just
Yeah.
don't mention that. Okay.
They don't care.
Yeah.
And condemnation, again, they're not gonna have a biblical view of, presume they will not have a biblical view of condemnation.
I feel like that was the hardest.
Our culture doesn't
Yeah.
understand condemnation.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, good, very good side.
Okay.
You all set?
Yeah.
What are you looking at me like that for?
Okay.
No, I'm sorry, can I have the pen back?